On Fridays, I used to let the rules bend a little. Tyler was 17, a decent kid with a decent head on his shoulders, and I wanted to be the kind of dad who trusted him instead of the kind who read him bedtime rules with a stopwatch. My ex-wife, Rachel, and I shared custody. He was with me that week, so I made chili, left $20 on the counter, and told him to be home by 11. He rolled his eyes, not meanly, just a teenager's way of saying he'd heard me. "We're just catching a movie, Dad. Later burgers at Nate's. I'll text you." He kissed our old lab on the head, called out bye to his little sister Emma, and was gone in a rush of cold air. The house settled into that quiet I used to love. The TV low, the dog snoring, Emma in her room humming over homework. I did what dads do. Folded laundry badly, stacked bowls in the dishwasher with a promise to fix the leaky rinse arm, this weekend for real. Scrolled through pictures I shouldn't admit I look at when the house is too quiet. Tyler in his baseball uniform, sun in his hair, Emma with gap-toothed grin. A photo from a summer fair where Rachel and I, not yet divorced, leaned into each other like the future was a porch swing that would never squeak. At 11:12, I sent the soft dad text. "How's the movie? Curfew 11 o'clock, remember. No Inville, no anger." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. At 11:28, I tried a joke. "The chili will file a missing persons report if you don't show." No reply. By 11:41, I'd convinced myself the theater had bad service. By 11:58, I'd convinced myself he was being a teenage jerk. At midnight, I called. The call slid straight to voicemail like it had been greased. At 12:07, Rachel called me, which she only does after 10 if something is wrong or Emma has a fever on her nights. "He texted me at 9, she said. "Popcorn selfie." "You?" I said I had nothing since. We tried not to panic together, failing quietly in that shared space divorced parents know too well. The part where your love for a kid is a rope you both hold while pretending you're not tugging it out of the other's hands. At 12:47, the phone lit with a number I didn't recognize. "Tyler." I answered, too fast, too hopeful. "Mr. Davis?" A woman said, measured voice with that careful professional sadness that knows it will live in your head forever. "This is Officer Morales with the County Sheriff's Department. There's been an accident on County Road 14. We need you to come to Memorial Hospital." Everything in me went loose and tight at the same time. Is my son okay? "It's best if you come to the hospital, sir." I woke Emma, which I shouldn't have, but I couldn't leave her alone. My neighbor, Hal, met us on the porch in his slippers and said he'd sit with her. Rachel said she was already on her way to the ER. The drive was a smear of red lights and street lamps and prayers I'd never said right even when I believed. I parked crooked, ran through sliding doors into a brightness that felt like noon and a smell that felt like cold. A nurse with soft eyes guided me to a small room with a curtain and a chair no one sits in on purpose. Officer Morales met me there. She didn't touch me. She didn't look away. "Your son was in a single-vehicle collision," she said. "He was a passenger. The car left the road and struck a tree. The driver survived. The other passenger is critical. Tyler, he didn't." I said no a dozen ways, whisper, breath, bark, prayer, until one of them came out a sound I didn't know I could make. When they pulled the curtain back, I saw my boy under a white sheet to mid-chest, his lip torn in a way that looked like he'd been biting it, the way he did when he concentrated on calculus. His hand was cool and too clean. I put my forehead to his and apologized for every curfew I'd moved and every lecture I hadn't given and the one I had the night before about gas money that now felt like an insult to the universe. That was the hour the world redrew itself without asking me. In the first days after, I moved through the house like a substitute teacher in a class that had already decided not to listen. People brought casseroles because casseroles are what you do when language gives out. Paper plates stacked like a fort on the counter. The lab slept by Tyler's door and huffed with that confused grief animals carry. I sat on his bed and tried to memorize the mix of sweat and cologne in his pillow before time stole it. Rachel and I kept finding ourselves hugging and then letting go like we'd touched a live wire. Divorce didn't evaporate, it just got drowned by something bigger and meaner. We planned a funeral no parent should have to plan, arguing over which photo looked most like him. The one from the All-Star game where he'd hit the only home run of his life, or the one from the lake where he'd finally tried the rope swing and gone in feet first like a dare. We picked the home run. I wrote an obituary that took 3 sentences to say a life. I hated every word. At the viewing, the line of people who loved my son curved down the hall. His teammates came in their jerseys, and the coach's voice broke, trying to tell me about Tyler's work ethic. A girl I didn't know stood a long time at the casket and shook so hard I put a hand on her shoulder like I was still a father who could fix shaking. Rachel's sister tucked ham sandwiches into my hands like love. A boy from the other car came in with his arm in a sling and a look that said he had learned something that will never unlearn. He tried to apologize. I pulled him into me and told him he didn't owe me anything, even though both of us knew that wasn't true. Nights were the size of stadiums and I was always in the last row. I drank to see if I could smudge the edges. It only made the edges come closer. Emma started sleeping on the couch outside my door. She'd ask me if I thought heaven had baseball. I told her yes and pictured my son waiting at a plate where nobody ever struck out. The therapist said to leave the room as it was for a while. The closet gaped like a pulled tooth. His sneakers, one with the blown-out heel I kept nagging him to replace, sat at an angle that made me cry more than the photo board did. Grief is petty like that. Picks a sock and makes it holy. Officer Morales stopped by with the report I said I wanted and then understood I didn't. There was no alcohol. There was rain earlier in the evening, a slick patch in a curve, a speed a little over the limit that wouldn't have mattered if every other thing had gone right. The driver had looked down at the wrong second, a buzzing phone they think, a song change, a reflex, and by the time he looked up, the tree had moved from someday to right now. I drove out to the place the next night and stood by the new flowers and the scorched bark, and I told that torn earth how angry I was. A truck slowed. A stranger rolled his window down and said, "I lost my brother there in '09. The universe doesn't specialize in originality." The worst moments were the almosts. The way my brain kept delivering his footstep on the stairs. His "Yo, Dad." His "We outta milk." Like a well-meaning friend who doesn't know the guest of honor is never going to arrive. I kept the porch light on anyway, like a man in a story who should have learned by now. 6 months is when people begin to believe you're repaired by the clock. I was not. I was a man pretending to be a man. The auto shop let me come back part-time and I stared at engines like they were algebra. I forgot which socket was which, and once I cried at a stuck bolt because it would not yield, and it felt like the world had decided to teach me a lesson in small humiliations. My boss, Curtis, put a greasy hand on my shoulder and said, "Take 5, Mike." And that became 20 and then a day, and then I thought about not going back at all. Emma's grades slid. She had been all A's, and then the letters dropped as if gravity worked different in our house. Rachel called late one Sunday and said, "If we don't fight like hell for her, we're going to lose her too." We made a plan like generals: schedule, therapy, softball sign-up, one of us at every game, the dog on a leash, and a routine like scaffolding. Felt like we might be tricking time into supporting us. Then one night I stood in Tyler's room with the glove he'd oiled and wrapped with rubber bands the way his coach showed him. I pressed the pocket to my face like it could still hold a fastball, and I thought about stopping. Not rage, not drama, just the idea of quiet. The idea of not listening to my own blood howl. I saw the way the obituary would look with my name under his, and the shame of that saved me. Emma's voice came from the hallway to the inside of my skull. "He promised he'd be home." I put the glove back. I sat on the floor. I told nobody for a week. On Thursday, I took the whiskey out to the backyard and poured it into the dirt. The smell was like a bar on a Monday, sticky and sour. Our neighbor Hal leaned over the fence and didn't say anything. He nodded once, like men nod when words would make it smaller, and then handed me a plastic cup of water like I'd run a marathon. I laughed, which hurt and helped. I called the therapist and said, "I don't know how to do this." She said, "You're doing it. Saying that is doing it." She gave me the address of a grief group in the church basement with coffee that tasted like penance and chairs that made you sit up straight. The first week, I hated every person for the way they had the nerve to survive. A woman cried describing her son's overdose, and I decided I wasn't like them until I realized I was exactly like them. The man across from me, a UPS driver with forearms like rope, said, 16, drunk driver. And he had my eyes in a different head. We sat through the silence together, and I left not better, but less alone. I started running because moving was easier than thinking. Dawn runs with air like glass. My breath fogged and the dog loped and my calves burned, and sometimes I cried a little behind the brim of my hat where the early shift commuters couldn't see. I downloaded a couch to 5K and then ignored the app and made up my own rules. Rule 1. Stop if you see the east go pink, because your boy would have mocked you for missing a decent sunrise. Rule 2. Keep going if you can. On mornings Emma ran with me, we counted breaths instead of miles. 4 in, 4 out, 4 in, 4 out, and by the end we had said Tyler without saying it. The driver's mother wrote me a letter and I didn't open it for 3 weeks. When I did, she said she wakes up with my son's name in her mouth and goes to sleep with it, and that they changed his phone plan so it can't buzz in the car anymore, and that she would switch places with me if bargains worked. I wrote back that I didn't know how to forgive, but I knew how to keep breathing, and maybe that was a start. We met once in a park, 2 parents inventing a language. We cried without drama. We hugged because that is what bodies do when minds run out. She gave me a tiny silver charm with Tyler's initials. I keep it on my key ring like I'm 13, and it's a secret. It has been 5 years. The lab is older and slower and whines a little when the porch steps are damp. Emma is 18 and argues with me about curfews with the confident injustice of someone who hasn't had the world rip a hole in her yet. She will leave for college in August, and I already practice not crying at stoplights. She told me she wants to study social work, to be the person I needed, which I think is a way of apologizing to a past that doesn't need apology. Rachel and I can sit at a diner now and share a plate of fries after Emma's games without saying the wrong thing. We will never be what we were, and we're not supposed to be. Sometimes we text each other photos of a cloud Tyler would have said looked like a dragon. We are learning to be a team in a season that doesn't have a schedule. County Road 14 has a new guardrail, the kind with a brighter sheen like it's trying to be optimistic. The tree is still there, scarred and stubborn, a map of what went wrong carved into living wood. I stop a few times a year at the little turnout where the gravel always makes you slide a ½ inch. Flowers appear and fade. Someone plants small flags on holidays. Sometimes I touch the bark and sometimes I don't. When I go alone, I say the things I couldn't say to a sheet. The dumb dad stuff like, your sister's curveball breaks now, and I finally fixed the rinse arm, and the Reds will disappoint me again, but I'm loyal. When I go with Emma, I let her talk and don't correct, don't father. I'm just audience. Applause when needed, silence otherwise. Grief didn't leave. It learned to sit in the passenger seat and keep its feet off the dash. It stops me sometimes in the produce aisle with apples too red, and on a Tuesday in May when a kid in a hoodie runs across the street with the same tilt as my boy, and at 3:17 a.m. when the house is so quiet you can hear the fridge click and you remember what a heart sounds like from the inside. But it doesn't strangle me every hour. It's a shadow I share a kitchen with. We take turns at the sink. I run less now, lift more, coach Emma's rec league for the little ones when her schedule allows. The first practice I almost told a kid, "Keep your eye on the ball, Tyler." And then I swallowed hard and called him by his real name. The parents think I'm intense because I make them do a safety talk every week. Phones in the trunk, buckles before ignition, nobody touches a playlist at a light, and if I see a kid reach for a buzzing rectangle, I tell them a story about a tree that doesn't move and a boy who did everything mostly right and how mostly wasn't enough one night. They roll their eyes and then keep their hands where I can see them. I can live with eye rolls. In the hall by the front door there's a small shelf Emma helped me hang straight. On it, a photo of Tyler in mid-swing, eyes up like he's trying to see the future. His glove with the rubber bands still wound because I cannot unwind them. A folded program from a funeral I can now read without shaking too much, and a key ring with the small silver initials tapping the wood when I set it down. Sometimes I touch the glove and it feels like choosing to stand. Sometimes I don't, and that also feels like choosing. If there is a lesson, it is impolite and simple. Call when you are late. Put the phone away when you drive. Leave porch lights on for reasons that aren't magical. Tell your people the dumb little loves. The way their hair curls after rain. The way they always leave 2 fries for later. The way they pretend they weren't crying in the shower. None of it changes physics or weather or trees that live where curves do. But all of it makes the world more bearable when it breaks. And it will break. The night my son didn't come home ended the life I recognized. The one that followed is smaller and more honest. I am not healed, I am held. by a daughter who laughs again, by an ex-wife who sits with me when the air gets thin, by neighbors who lean over fences with water, by a dog who still waits at a door that opens less often. I am a father to a living child and a keeper of a memory. And most mornings, when the east goes pink, I put on my shoes, open the door, and step into a world that once felt impossible. I walk anyway,